Well, hello everyone. My name is Rick Howard. I'm the Chief Security Officer for N2K, formerly known as the Cyberwire. How many Cyberwire fans do we have out there? 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, great. It's better than the women percentage that we were just talking about. All right. This is my boss, Simone Petrella.
Hi. Are we just doing this down here? Because
I'm doing it down here.
Yeah. All right. That sounds great.
Yeah. So, tell them who you are.
Hi, I'm Simone Petrella, president of N2K Networks, and I tried to hire Rick many years ago, and I failed, and so I merged a company to get him to work for me.
Yeah, okay, I told her, no, I don't want to work for you, okay, and I can't run away from her, okay.
Yeah.
And we're talking about today the Moneyball approach to buying down risk, not superstars. How many people, oh, we need to change the slide. One more. There we go, okay. Let's start with this. How many people have read the book Moneyball? Really? So you guys are sports fans? Or you just like the book? Sports fan? Sports fan? How many people have seen the movie? How many have done both? All right, so I'm gonna start right here and just say Brad Pitt is probably one of our finest actors. And I'm prepared to die on that particular nerd hill right now. Anybody wanna challenge me? Simone, you got a favorite Brad Pitt movie?
I'm more of a Ryan Reynolds fan personally, but
I love Ryan
the
Reynolds.
humor is a bit, yeah.
What's a favorite Brad Pitt movie? Anybody got one? Which one?
Oh, that is a good movie.
Fight Club. Don't talk about it though, that's what he said, yeah. Anybody got another one? What? 12 Monkeys. Oh, that wasn't even on my list, but that's an excellent book, right? Or movie. My favorite is Legends of the Fall, right? You guys cry every time, every single time in that one, right? All right, so the reason we're talking about this is I believe we've been asking the wrong questions, okay, when it comes to cybersecurity workforce development, right? And so, and what I mean by all that is, I think this movie is the perfect metaphor for the InfoSec profession, right? And I realize that even though this group has a big grouping of sports fans, I'm not particularly a sports fan. Are you, Simone?
I am a sports fan, but not that big of a baseball fan.
Not a baseball fan?
It's okay, we can keep the analogy going.
So I'm not, especially not really a baseball fan, but I watched this movie through a different lens, right? The movie, to me, is really about how an organization changes its culture based on first principles. Right? It's really about how hard it is to change the culture of an organization when everybody wants to keep doing it the way we've always done it, right? And because, you know, that's always a great strategy, right? So the movie stars Brad Pitt and a bunch of my favorite actors. He plays Billy Beane, the Oakland A's general manager. Got Oakland A's fans in here? No? No Oakland?
Yeah, one.
2? Okay. Yeah. Is it? Yeah. So this is about going into the 2002 season, and Billy Beane has a problem. You see that slide up there. He has $42 million for salary cap. It means he has $42 million to pay players to be on his team. His arch nemesis, the New York Yankees, they have $126 million to field their team. So for those of you that are math challenged, that's 3 times as much, right? And so, and by the way, 3 other high-end salary cap teams stole his 3 big superstar players the previous year, right? And so that is really a hard situation. So that is the problem that Mr. Beane is handling right now. In the 2001 season, he was paying $7 million apiece for 3 players, right? One of them, I got the names here, Johnny Damon, and got poached by the Boston Red Sox. Jason Isringhausen got poached by the St. Louis Cardinals. And who's the last one? Jason Giambi went to his arch nemesis, by the way, the New York Yankees. So ouch, that had to hurt, right? And every Major League Baseball pundit was forecasting that the Oakland A's are gonna have a horrible, horrible season, right? So that's the whole thing about this. Now, in the book, Billy Beane's a fan of Bill James. Do you guys know who Bill James is? He's the guy that invented sabermetrics. Back in the 70s and 80s, a way to evaluate teams and players based on deep statistical analysis, right? And in the movie, he's represented by Jonah Hill, listed up there somewhere on that poster, right? And in a chance encounter in a parking lot in the movie, Jonah Hill tells Brad Pitt that there is an epidemic failure within the game to understand what is really happening. And this leads people who run Major League Baseball teams to misjudge their players and mismanage their teams. And the reason that Simone and I are up here talking to you today is that we believe there is an epidemic failure in the way the InfoSec programs that we all run manage their people and manage their workforce development. We're asking the wrong questions, I believe, right? So let me see if I got everything there. Yes. I've lost my place in my notes. So I'm going to turn it over to you. Okay, yeah.
Awesome. Well, you know, when Rick and I first started chatting and he came up with this analogy, I've been talking about for years, we have this epidemic in the way that we approach the workforce challenge. And how many people have heard the statistic 500,000 this week? If you have not heard AI. What's 500,000 when people say 500,000? Yeah, how many jobs are open? 500,000. Well, I'm here. I hope you all forgive me for using bad language. I call bullshit. Because not only are the statistics there that we say, well, there's a 500,000 open jobs, but if you actually dig into them and you look at the statistics in more detail, you actually see that there are over 200,000 individuals who have a Security Plus certification. Does anyone want to take a guess of how many open jobs require a Security Plus certification? No, 60,000. We have around 90,000 worldwide CISSPs. How many jobs are looking for a CISSP? 60,000. So we have all of these people with these credentials. And I think it's really interesting when we talk about Security Plus because that's an entry-level credential, right? It's one thing that someone gets when they're first starting their career. And yet we're actually looking for less people with those credentials than we have open positions. If you also look, we talk about how the gap keeps widening. Well, 2024 has been very interesting because it's the first year we've had month-over-month declines in hiring in tech and information security. It's a 3.8% decline in April of 2024, according to LinkedIn's job report. So, is this talent gap real? Is it there? I mean, we're here talking about workforce development, so we've got to care about the issue, right? Well, I'm going to sit here and say, and this goes back to the Oakland A's, it is not that we have this huge issue with getting more people into the field, because there are tons of graduates coming out of universities with cybersecurity degrees. There's 178 organizations or universities you can go get a degree in cybersecurity. But we're not hiring entry-level talent. We're looking for qualified talent, and that often means experienced talent. The #1 thing cited in ISC2's annual workforce study was the lack of qualified talent. And I would present to you all that the mismatch and the reason we're getting it wrong is because we say that we're trying to build more people to get into the field when we as the industry are actually looking at it wrong, because we have expectations that we can't fill if we're not willing to actually build the teams that we're looking for.
So in the movie, Billy Beane's in one of the offices talking to his old scouts. I don't know if you guys are baseball fans, but the scouts are these old curmudgeon guys. They've been in baseball their entire career. They can barely walk, but their job is to walk around the entire country and find talent. And they use these intangible metrics to figure out if a baseball player is going to be good. Like, does he have a square jaw? How does the ball sound coming off the bat, all right? Does he have a good-looking girlfriend, all right? That was a line right out of the movie, right? So
that's Hollywood, Rick.
Oh, come on. That's how I want to pick all my InfoSec professionals. Does he have a good-looking girlfriend, all right? I'm sure that's an indicator, all right? So Billy Beane has a different idea about how to do this. He changes his entire organization from those kinds of intangible assets to first principles. He convinces himself that instead, as a general manager of the Oakland A's, instead of buying, his job is not to buy superstar players. His job is to buy wins. In order to buy wins, you have to buy runs. And in order to buy runs, you need players who can get on base, okay? And so when he has that opportunity, he goes out and buys a player called Scott Hatterberg, played by, who's the guy that does the Guardians of the Galaxy movie? Chris Pratt, okay? Scott Hatterberg is a catcher, but he has an arm injury and can't throw anymore. So Major League Baseball teams don't want him. He's done with his career. Billy Beane hires him to play first base, not because he can play first base, because he's never played first base. Billy Beane doesn't care about how good he plays first base. What he wants is someone who can get on base, and Scott Hatterberg is one of those guys, right? And so that's my, what I want to talk to all of you about is that, are you trying to hire those players that Simone was talking about? Are you going for those superstar unicorns that have 25 years experience and 17 certs that don't exist, but we have a glut of people who have lots of aptitude and are willing to learn stuff that we could fill to build our first principle team? That's what we're talking about. Last year I wrote this book, published this book in conjunction with RSA, right? And I highly recommend that after this presentation, we all hold hands, walk over to the bookstore, and you guys can buy my book, right? So, because I got to send my kids to college, right? I'm just saying, right? That's the best joke I have today. So if you're not laughing at that, this is going to be a long, long presentation, right? But the basic thesis of the book is that we, as an organization, as an InfoSec profession, haven't discovered what our absolute first principle is. We haven't figured out what Billy Beane is. What is the first principle we're going to build our teams on, right? And I make the case in the book that it's this, and you tell me if you like this or not, right? It is, and it's very simple, it's a Twitter line. I think that all of us should be pursuing this goal, regardless of the vertical you're in, and regardless of how many resources you have. As an ultimate goal, this is it. Reduce the probability of material impact to your organization due to a cyber event over the next, say, 3 years. Take a deep breath. That's really 3 pieces, right? It's reduce the probability, which implies you have to know how to calculate probability for your organization that we can talk about in the book. Second piece is materiality. You don't want to spend resources on things that aren't material, right? And so, and face it, most of us in our network, we have lots of things that aren't material. So don't spend money protecting dumb stuff. Protect the stuff that is material to the business. And thirdly, we want to time-bound the calculation, because there's a chance that the Chinese may break into your network, say, in the next 100 years, but the probability of them doing it in the next 3 years is completely different, right? So that's the thing. Now, we can argue, after we go up to the bookstore and you guys buy my book for my kids to go to college, we can argue whether or not you think I nailed it, all right? But for the sake of argument, let's just say you agree with me, all right? What that means is, if that's true, and I think it is, if the ultimate first principle is to reduce the probability of material impact, that means every resource spend we do should fundamentally demonstrate that we are buying down risk for the organization. And I'm telling you here, right now, that none of us are doing that for workforce development. Okay, we don't hire players, we don't train our teams in order to buy down risk. We have other goals for that.
Yeah. So, again, I'm here just calling out all of us. And I will caveat this, I am guilty too. I am a 15-year veteran of the cybersecurity industry, and I would hire people based on these intangibles and everything else. But yep. I also am a recovering...
Well, can we ask, how many people have done that? All right.
And like you say, like, oh, if you don't have it on your resume, we kind of in the interview said, do you like actually have a home computer, and what are you doing? Are you building a Linux box, or what are you, like, we kind of ask a lot of those questions and try and get to the ground truth. I am also a recovering consultant, and if you have had any consultant...
You can't say that and let that go by. Recovering consultant, okay.
Right, but if any of you have ever worked with a consultant in your organization, I'm sure you have, then what is the first thing we walk in and we say? Oh, let's evaluate your people, process, and technology. Well, it's a little bit of a trope, but it's also an accurate way to actually categorize the pillars on that 3-legged stool that makes an optimal organization. And that's true in cybersecurity, that's true if you're in finance, it's true of anything that you're building when you're talking about how an organization is going to accomplish an objective or a mission. Well, I've noticed over the years there's this funny thing where we like to say, let's focus on people, process, and technology in cybersecurity. But what does that really mean? Well, we actually really love technology. And I say that because we're at a show where if anyone has walked that expo floor, it is crawling with technologies, and they are cool technologies. Everything's out there. You can kind of solve one sliver. You can now, I'm going to screw this up because George Kurtz is saying platformatization, and he's made up that word, but I think it's a good one for what's kind of
That's
going on
to be the next
downstairs.
Year's theme for RSA.
Platformatization. I'll get that right. But so we over-index, especially in security, on technology. And I understand why, because the incentives are there that we have to show an ROI quickly. And it's easy to do that with technology, or it's easier, because you spend on the tool, you implement the tool. We actually often don't calculate the implementation costs or then the tech debt we actually incur when it phases out, but that's another talk. And so that's where we like to spend our money. And then we say, well, we need some process around it, so we will kind of talk about the process involved in what we need to implement. And then we say, well, yeah, and we need a team. We need people, and obviously I'm gonna go hire good people, and why can't I find good people? But I'm gonna get good people, so we're good. And what I would say is the fundamental challenge with that is, especially in an industry where things change, the tools change, if we don't have the right workforce with the right capabilities and competencies, then we're not going to be able to actually leverage those tools, that technology, in a way that actually makes our organization more secure against those risks. You are no longer buying down risk if you have bought the tool and don't have the people who understand the fundamentals of how to use it. I promise we'll get to some question and answer at the end, if that's okay. Oh, yeah. Sure.
But I just want to use an example. So cyber risk quantification is an example of a process that organizations can use to get to materiality and looking at problems.
I'm going to make you use this so people can hear
I'll
you.
repeat. Oh, yeah, you can come with it. Yeah.
Thanks. So cyber risk quantification is a process that people could use, and there's a lot of tooling, but there are, analyst firms like Gartner, don't like it. And I'm just interested in why there isn't more maturity around things like that, frameworks that try and address how organizations can have a more mature approach around process. I mean, my view is I'm relatively new to the cybersecurity world, but it's like there's a lack of process.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's part of what we're positing to everyone today is, and my answer to why that hasn't happened or why it's been so difficult for us to get to that point is it's really hard.
It's really hard.
It's not easy. It's hard to put a quantifiable metric to something. It's hard to measure the intangibles of kind of what you're putting together in an organization. And then when you start to get to the people, it's really hard because it turns out that we think we're rational beings. We're not that rational.
Can you go back a slide, Simone?
Sure, I can.
I want to address the question specifically about quantification. You're absolutely right. We suck at this, right? There's a couple of books that you all should read to get ready to be better at this. One is the How to Measure Anything in Cybersecurity by Hubbard and Sierson. It is a fantastic primer about how to calculate risk for your business, right? The second one is the FAIR methodology by Jack Jones and Jack Freund, another fantastic primer about how to think about this. But I will tell you, all those guys are friends of mine, and I've interviewed them on my podcast about all this stuff, and I give them grief about this because I say, I've read all those books a couple of times, taken copious notes, but I kept waiting for the chapter at the end of the book that says, and here's how you do it in the real world, right? Because none of that is there, right? And so I wrote it in my book, right? So there's a whole chapter in the book about how do you do it. So that's the reason you have to go with me to buy a book up at the bookstore, right? To figure all this out. I will say that as a group, one of the reasons we struggle with this, all right, is that we haven't come to a consensus on what we're all trying to do. In fact, what I mean by that, if we go around the room and ask any three of us, what is the purpose of your InfoSec program, you're likely to get three different answers. Let's do an experiment. Okay, who wants to tell me what the purpose of your InfoSec program is? Who's brave? I need three of you. Come on, we won't yell at you. We won't make fun of you, right? What's the purpose of your program? Protect your business. Okay, that's a good answer. Yeah?
Protect our clients' business.
Protect your client's business. Another fantastic answer. Do I get a third? What's that? Prevent misuse of data. Another third great idea, right? And these are all fantastic ideas, and I've talked to a lot of CISOs about this over the years, and there's literally hundreds of those ideas, right? And here's the key point to all that. They're all different, right? As a community, we have not come to a consensus about what is the absolute thing we are trying to do. I get a quote up here by Garry Kasparov. He's the world chess champion, a former world chess champion. He says, without a goal, maneuvering is aimless. You might be a master tactician, but you have no sense of strategy, right? And I believe that our InfoSec profession, we have a fundamental misunderstanding of the difference between strategy and tactics.
That's why I want to point it back to here, because that is the essence of having a strategy. Is buying a tool is a tactic, but we buy tools without thinking about the broader picture of what are we looking to accomplish. And you can't put that tool in place unless you have the right processes built around it and then the right people to implement. Now, the reason I say it's hard, because if we go back to this Oakland A's example, we've had some years where we've had some pretty awesome budget times in cybersecurity world, but it's not unlimited. We're living in a world of constrained budget environments. What is the biggest operating spend in a cybersecurity program?
Ooh, I know. Oh, I can't answer.
You can't answer, you're not allowed. Anyone want to take a guess? Labor, it's people. We're spending the most of our money on headcount. And yet we say, well, what are we going to do to invest and make sure that they're growing through our pipeline? And when I say pipeline, I don't mean just how do they get in the door. What do we do to make sure that they're becoming more competent and aligned to our mission as they grow in their careers there? That takes a strategy. You can't just put a bunch of people who can get on first base because of the statistics. You can use that to evaluate, but then you actually have to figure out how you're going to train them. It doesn't stop there, right? You have to work together as a team. You have to develop their positions. You have to understand who you're going to put in what place on the field. When Rick and I started to talk about the analogy of Moneyball, the thing that always stood out to me is that where cybersecurity is not like baseball is when you go out to the baseball field, and remember, I'm not the biggest expert on baseball, but I do know enough that the positions are very well defined. If you are a first baseman, you're a first baseman. We know what's required to be a first baseman versus a shortstop versus an outfielder, and people are in those positions. But in cybersecurity, we kind of like to buy a tool, and then we say, well, you're an incident responder. Well, what does it mean to be an incident responder if you work for CrowdStrike? Well, that's different than someone who's actually kind of doing the day-to-day incident response but has the relationship with CrowdStrike when they're working for a large bank. And so we have no common definition of what those roles are, and we have great things that exist, like the NICE framework that the Department of Commerce and NIST has put out to define and help us have a common lexicon from those roles. But you know what it can't do, because our organizations are too different? It can't define the roles within our organization. JP Morgan Chase, which spends $250 million a year on cybersecurity, is gonna have a very different job profile of what their cybersecurity teams look like than the regional bank somewhere here on the West Coast. It just is a necessity and a reality, right? We're dealing with different budgets. So you can't build a strategy unless you think about all three of those things together, and that often means taking the time, both in process and also the people, to sit down and define what are the roles I need. And not only what are the roles I need, what are the inherent skills? What are the inherent competencies that are actually required for someone to be successful in that role? And that takes work. And I would posit it is measurable. It is possible to use data to actually identify what are those roles, give yourself that destination, and tools can be a part of that. Process becomes a part of it. And then once you know what your destination is as far as the program goes, then you can look at what you have. Who's on your bench? What do those players look like? How are they doing? How do they align to those roles? Not in a performance evaluation kind of way, but hey, we brought you on and told you that you were going to be a jack of all trades, and we didn't give you any of the tools that you need to be successful as you progress in your career. And that's not going to make me, as a leader of my organization, better at buying down risk in the business.
So what Simone was talking about, that two diagrams about we're mostly technology, right? And what I want to make the case here is that our primary job is to be Billy Beane, not to manage the tech stack, although we have to do that too, but really our primary job should be managing the employee pipeline, right? Not part-time, almost a full-time gig. If you're buying into any of the stuff that we're talking about, we have to be flexible enough to buy the players that we need to buy down risk immediately. And not just do one time a year when we hire the new superstar that we've been looking for. We need to fill that pipeline at the front, like Simone said, and then make decisions about whether or not that's working out, make quick decisions whether or not that's working out, and maybe release those players and bring in new ones to fill them, but we have to be efficient enough to do that. I've talked about strategy and tactics, right? Strategy is the thing we want to do. It is the direction we are moving our organization to. Tactics are the things we're going to do to make that happen. So for example, we may want to deploy as a strategy a robust zero trust program. In order to get that done, one tactic we might deploy is deploying a two-factor authentication system. Just saying, right? You can decide, here's the thing. Okay, we may want to deploy a different strategy. The second one up there is the intrusion kill chain prevention strategy. That will probably significantly reduce the risk to your organization if you do that. However, it's really expensive. Okay, you have to have a lot of people, a lot of thought, a lot of process, really hard to do well, all right? So, but it could be done if you have enough money. If you're a Fortune 500 company, you probably have enough money in the couch cushions to deploy all these strategies and tactics. But if you're a company like N2K, we're a startup. We have zero resources to do that. We have to be judicial about what we decide to work on, right? And so what I'm saying is we might be better at performing workforce development strategy because I might get more bang for the buck for that than I would for deploying a big intrusion kill chain prevention strategy. I might be able to reduce my risk more by just making sure we're more efficient at the things we've decided to do. So here's the question I have for you. How many people have tools deployed in their network that they're only using like 10% of the capability? Everybody has that. I can't believe you didn't raise your hand, all right? So I'm telling you, you might be able to justify hiring a new person or training a person on the staff to take it to 30% or to 40%, and thus buying down more risk for the organization much more cheaply and much more efficiently. That's kind of what we're talking about here.
You got to hit the right button to actually advance slides. So I think the big question is then, how do you do that? How do you actually integrate the pillar of workforce development into your tactics? And how do you kind of prove out the business case of how that ultimately is more efficient? And Rick, I don't want to let you off the hook when you said you can do it more in a more cost-effective way or more cheaply, because I think we forget that all the time, especially when you hear the theme. I think we've at least gone 7 minutes and haven't mentioned the word AI, and I heard that.
Bingo! I got the bingo.
So
right.
I had to drop it in there, but you know we're really banking, and I'm very excited, like everyone else, about the possibilities of AI to make our workload more effective, and how can we actually solve some of these challenges by relying on machine learning and AI. We can also have a conversation about the security risks of AI for another conversation as well. But the truth of the matter is that when we think about the expenditure that we put on people, whether it's the opportunity risk of not filling a position that then is actually increasing the risk threshold of the risk profile of your organization, whether it's, what I see a lot in organizations is, and I am all for this, we're going to give everyone a tuition reimbursement. So we support people development. We're going to give them a pot of money so that they can go and take a course, get a credential, go to a conference, whatever else it is. And those are all well and good, but let's be honest about what that is. There is no ROI on that spend, other than your people survey at the end of the year that says, are you happier because we gave you money for a development opportunity? And people say, yeah, I am. Are they better at their jobs? Maybe. Are they aligned to what they do? Also maybe, probably not. I can't tell you how many times I sent someone to something and they came back and they're like, this was amazing. I hacked a stoplight and we got to this stuff. And I'm like, amazing, and I'm glad you got that perspective. I think that's good in the aggregate, but we're doing a cyber defense mission over here, and so that's not going to actually be a good spend for my $10,000 that I just brought back to the organization.
That's my pet peeve about this, Simone. Most of this money we spend on training and bringing in new players is not to benefit the organization. It's really to benefit the employee, right? That's okay, because you want to keep them happy and you want to keep them progressing in their career, but as the person in charge of security for the organization, I want to spend money reducing risk, okay? And I should be building my hiring program and my training program that does exactly that. I want to do those other things too, but that shouldn't trump bringing down risk for the organization.
Yeah. But that's where it gets hard, because then we ask ourselves the question, how do we do that? How do we build a training program? How do we give people opportunities that's aligned to those things that actually can be cost effective and aligns to my budget and it maximizes all the spend I want to do? Well, that's where I think the power of data actually can help when it comes to people. So what do I mean by power of data? Well, I talked about destination. We have to understand the job roles first. We have to know what it means to be an identity and access management professional at your organization at this proficiency level. Because we've done this now with a bunch of customers, and I still have yet to walk into a client where they have told me that a level 1 and a level 2 and a level 3 is the same in each client environment. They have different leveling systems, they have different numbers of levels, there's a whole HR component, it gets super complex. But you know what you can do is, regardless of your organization, regardless of how the HR team structures all your levels and your pay bands, you can establish data as a cybersecurity leader around what's required in this role. What does the profile look like of this role at this level, and how does that actually align? If you look at that little rose petal at the top, you could say, here is the fingerprint. Here is the fingerprint of what this role looks like. If I have that for all my roles, now I have my target. I know where I want to go, and I know what that looks like. You can look at that at a programmatic level. Well, now you have a team. So you only have one side of your data equation. You collect all the data on what you need in those roles. You're looking at hard skills. You're looking at technical skills. You have to often look at professional skills or soft skills, right? Communication, ability to actually take requirements and distill them into an action plan. How do you actually build a business case? How do you work across organizations, because it needs to be a highly collaborative environment? You have one side of the data. That's not the end of your data. Now you have to look at the team that you have today. Where do they fall against that target? Mm-hmm. How do you measure them? Well, you can do a few things. You can collect data because you can give them all a technical assessment. On a performance assessment, you can assess them. You can say, let's look at you against the target competencies that we actually put in those roles. Okay, you don't want to do that with your staff. You know what you can do as a good fallback? Let them self-evaluate them on that scale. It might not be perfect. We're dealing with humans here. We're irrational beings. It's not going to be like a nice one-to-one. But you can collect data on where they fall against those targets. When you have 2 data points, again, remember, recovering consultant, we can do gap analysis. And you know why gap analysis, even though, again, it might be like everyone rolls their eyes and says, man, the consultant wants to build 100 decks, like 100 slides and send it to me. It actually is really helpful, because now you can look at what you have against what you want, and then say, now I'm going to make decisions. I'm going to make decisions on how do I acquire new talent. I have a chronic gap in a certain area, and I know I can do entry level here. I can reserve some positions for entry level talent. I'm going to do that. Or you could say, I'm actually going to change all my job descriptions, because it turns out when I'm acquiring talent, I'm looking for all the wrong people, so I'm getting bad candidates in the door, or I'm just not aligned to the role needs I have. So you can make decisions that have cost implications on the acquisition side. Once you have them in the door, now you can look at your training programs. What am I spending money on? Am I giving people access to an all-you-can-eat library of content that no one uses and I can't actually track it? Or maybe I should actually look at my budget more holistically and say, I'm going to really overinvest in this particular area, and I know this vendor or this course provider or this rotational program has what I need to get them to the next level, and I'm going to then reserve other budget or less of my budget to give them that range environment. I want live fire exercises. I want to do CTFs. You can make a holistic decision and cost decisions that have budget implications based on understanding that data. And last but not least, there's that retention piece. We know that there is a cost in retention or attrition in that regard, when, especially in organizations that don't have career pathways for people. Now, I know we're in a job market that is more contracted than we've had in the past. People are staying put, but now you're left with 2 questions. Are you going to help grow them because they're staying put and they have to be more valuable to your organization? Or are you going to continue to kind of let them flounder, and then when the market frees up again, they're going to jump anyway because you haven't given those opportunities, and now you're starting at square one again? Either way, that's going to cost you a lot of money. And you know, last but not least, I think that it comes down to like those employee satisfaction surveys. We ultimately are on, people in this world in cybersecurity, we're on a mission. And Rick and I hosted a dinner a few months ago, and you know, I think we talk about ourselves as the industry. And my challenge to everyone here is we need to stop talking about ourselves as an industry. We are becoming a profession. And if we are going to be a profession, we have to think about what we do and how we do it in the way that we would if we were a profession.
If you're buying into any of this, it opens up all kinds of opportunities. It means you no longer have to worry about buying the superstar, the unicorn that we've all been pursuing our entire career.
Oh, because they don't exist?
Because they don't exist.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. There's a shortage of those people, right? And so that means you can hire the college graduate coming out of university who may not even have a computer science degree, but has aptitude and a desire to learn. Or you could hire that transitioning government worker who has all this life experience and, oh my God, work ethic, but has no experience in cybersecurity, and train them on the tasks that you need to do to buy down risk for your organization. That is something that could be useful to everybody, right, to make our programs even safer. Now, I've talked to a lot of CISOs about this over the last year. They say, we do a lot of this already. They point to 2 programs. They say, we do interns in the summer. We bring a bunch of interns in, and we evaluate them and try to hire them sometimes. How many people have intern programs where you bring them in and have no slots for them when they get to the end? Okay, all of it, I've done that. That's really stupid. What, talk about wasting resources, okay? That's exactly that, right? And so, and by the way, that's not full time. You do that during the summer, okay? You do a little bit and you don't do it as a pipeline. The other one they always recommend, they always talk about is they have the rotation program where they take employees that are running and they let them go off to other organizations and learn new things, right? Which is a fantastic program and you should keep doing that. But that's for the employee. That's to benefit that employee to make their career more fulfilling and maybe keep them on board more. But that doesn't buy down specifically, right? So what I'm saying is those are great, but maybe not the most important things we should do, right? We should work on the workforce development pipeline as a full-time gig so that we can reduce risk for our organization.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of our clothing thoughts and all this. Our challenge to you is to think about people, process, and technology, and there's great technologies out there, but don't give short shrift to building out the people workforce strategy. You need to have a plan in place of how you're gonna manage that team, how you're gonna implement them, just as you would the technology, the processes around it, right? You can't just focus on one. It's gonna be a really uneven table if you have only 2 out of your 3 legs there. So that's our challenge to you, is to actually take that away. And I welcome the feedback from everyone that's here. And I ask that, you know, to consider, it is possible to use data to help you get there. It seems really hard and daunting, and we don't do it because it is really time intensive, and people come and say, I'm gonna have to have a conversation with every individual and figure out what they want and then what I want from the role, and we're gonna have to have like hours and hours of discussions one-on-one. There is a way to collect that information and allow you to make strategic decisions in a way that is faster to get there, and give those same information points, those same data to employees so they have more agency in where they want to go in their careers. It is a win-win. So that's I think that's our challenge to everyone here.
So flip me to the next slide. So this is what we talked about, okay, the Moneyball approach to buying or helping your workforce development process. The challenge of the security gap, we've been told our entire careers that there's a gap, and it's probably not a gap, what Simone was talking about. Getting together the difference between strategy and tactic, keeping that in mind. We established training as a perk for employees, but not really to buy down risk. That's what we talked about. So we think that workforce development as a strategy is as important as any of the other strategies you might want to pursue, like zero trust, resilience, automation, whatever all those things are, right? And that we should not be worrying about trying to find that unicorn to hire into our organization. Yeah.
We got a baseball team here.
We got a baseball team.
And we got to put everyone in the right positions on the field.
To buy
And
wins.
To buy wins. But that also means that, you know, we have a little extra work to do because we have to actually decide what those positions are before we put them on the field.
So I have some references for you guys can look at later, okay? That's the book, Moneyball. I highly recommend, if you're a baseball fan, you should read that by now. The movie is one of my favorites. Simone and I did a podcast on this topic last year that talks about some of the same things we talked about here. What's the last slide we have?
I think you're just giving Aaron Sorkin a really big shout out.
I know, yeah, he wrote Moneyball, okay? Any Aaron Sorkin fans out there?
Oh, yeah.
West Wing, Sports Night, yeah, they've got people.
Newsroom was so good.
So good. Last slide. Okay, let me leave you with this. At the end of the movie, Billy Beane has had a successful season. He's won one more game than he did the previous year. He's won more games than his arch nemesis. He went to the playoffs, and the owner of the Boston Red Sox, Henry James, I can't read that from here, he wants to hire Billy Beane to be the manager of the Red Sox in the next season. Billy Beane doesn't take the job and goes back to Oakland, but the Red Sox adopt the methodology and go to the World Series in 2 years, right? But the last scene of the movie, he turns to Brad Pitt and says, anybody who's not tearing down their team right now and rebuilding it using your model, they're dinosaurs. And our point to all of you, if you're not burning down your workforce development plan right now and rebuilding it on the Moneyball model, I think that you're the dinosaurs. And we can take questions if you like.
Sure.
So I'll just start. Sean Griffin, I'm the CISO at Siemens Software.
I don't know.
They'll figure it out.
I'll just talk.
All right, just talk loud.
I didn't plan a testimonial, but I work with Simone and her team at SAP. Highly recommend. We had a transformation strategy specifically around workforce development. Simone and her team were fantastic. A couple points here, though. Workforce development is highly prioritized. And one thing, Rick, or what I would say is leadership development. No offense to everybody in the room, if you're leading cybersecurity, you've pretty much been a geek most of your life. Have you been taught in leadership skills? You know, are you developing your team around that? I think one of the hesitations by many teams is not just within cybersecurity, it's IT, but if you hire somebody in new, can you develop them? Do you have a path for them? Do you have a career path for them? Are you okay to push them out of the nest? You know, I'll give an example. Tim Held, who's the CISO at US Bank, used to be one of my firewall engineers. I could not keep up with him on promotions. I pushed him out of the nest. So what I would say is if you don't have a mentor, even if you're the CISO, even if you're the senior director, even if you're the VP, it always helps to have a mentor to give you different perspectives from there. But workforce development, I think Simone and Rick are spot on. We've been hesitating on hiring new talent. I'm talking really new. And I've hired some people that were degrees in music, you know, made some of the best threat hunters I've ever had. You know, people with art degrees that decided, hey, I ran a help desk. Take chances on this especially.
Is there a question in there?
Nope. Just happened to be.
Yeah, I would. So I appreciate that you're emphasizing people, process, and technology, but my view is that, of course, I'm sure you would have talked about this more if you had more time, but I think and you can comment on this, whether I'm on or off or what have you, but at HP, they would have the HP way, and I know they're not the company they used to be, but they would focus on process excellence, and they could take any employee, regardless of capability, and put any employee into an excellent process, and then that they could develop into an excellent employee and just follow the process that they developed and they knew that was right for the organization. So you have to do both, right? I mean, workforce development is important, but you also have to work on process as well. I've worked in a lot of organizations where there was a lot of brilliant people, but if you don't have a process, they're all cowboys.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's spot on. And you cannot build out a people strategy without having a process plan in place to get there. So it's not just about finding the people. That's not the takeaway from this. Can you build the process? And that's going to be different. At HP, they're going to have the HP way. But there are organizations that are taking that same data on the people and saying, let's build a university. We're going to invest in a process to bring people from point A to point B.
Yeah,
that thing of getting people from point A, that's where your process becomes. Yeah, that's the people process. You're building a process to enable that people.
I think the point we're trying to make is that we're not trying to say don't do those other things, the process and technology. What we're saying is we're not doing the people thing correctly.
Or
right?
the people process.
Yeah.
During the Four Horsemen keynote yesterday, someone asked a really good question to Paul Nakasone about what skills should be focused on in universities. It was a professor who asked the question, what technical skills should be taught? And his response was that, there needs to be more of a focus on emotional intelligence and building those skill sets out in people. And I think as an industry or a profession, we kind of view those as being more intangible and harder to measure. And so since you're talking about shifting to this tactic of measuring those things and hiring based on measurable skills, do you have any markers or metrics for measuring things like emotional intelligence or leadership skills like he asked about? And
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, good question. Thank you. So we specifically, oftentimes the thing that measures those skills are either a manager evaluation or someone's self-evaluation. There are some cool companies out there that actually do measure on those more emotional intelligence, leadership skills, communication. They often fall in the aptitude realm. I think they're really powerful. I think they're really, really powerful tools, and they can be leveraged. You have to have an organization, and you as an organization need to be willing to invest, because you can't measure the way that those are often measured. I'll get super woo-woo on you guys, on the psychometrics of it. It often requires sitting down for 2 or 3 hours to actually sort of extract from the assessment what those skills are. So if you can invest in it, I highly encourage it. I can chat with you afterwards about some great companies I know that do that. But
we all have
it's
questions
really
we ask on interviews, right? Someone's heard me tell the story all the time. You interview somebody for the job and you go through the requirements and will they fit culturally and blah, blah, blah. But the question I always ask at the end is, what are they running at their house? Because if they're not running a Linux box that they built themselves, they're not smart enough to be on my team. Not that they have to know Linux, just that they were smart enough to figure out a problem they didn't know how to solve, and they solved it. That's the aptitude that I'm looking for. Because I'm hiring them. I don't know how to solve the problem for the job I'm hiring them for. I need them to do it, and I'm not going to be much help besides, here's the bathroom, here's some water, what else do you need, right?
Thanks for the presentation today. What's your take on the try before buy, with the contractors compared to hiring an actual employee?
I think that, again, it comes down to what's your process and your strategy for your organization and what makes sense within your budget. So I think try before you buy can be incredibly effective if you're working with a trusted partner that has reliable talent that you can kind of go back and have that relationship with them. It comes down to where is the industry going to spend its money? I think that one of the pitfalls of doing the try before you buy is that a lot of times we think that try before you buy means they're going to come in and be able to hit the ground running on day one because someone else is responsible for growing them. And that's a recipe for disaster. Because if you think someone else is going to do the job for you, they're not going to have your business context. They're not going to actually follow kind of your cultural plan. And I think it has a lot of pitfalls in it. So I think it's a thing you can do, but I don't think it's the right long-term solution.
On the plus side, I think that if your bureaucracy is slow about hiring, I've been in an organization where it takes months and months and months to bring in a new employee, right? And that kind of contradicts what we're talking about with managing the workforce development pipeline. So maybe that organization can help you try some players out quickly.
I think it can be a tool in the acquisition side. I think everything is a tool. You have to sort of look at it kind of holistically. So I would just caution you against doing all one versus the other.
Yeah. It's not perfect.
Yeah, so you mentioned in one sentence do a gap analysis against what you want and what you need. But I think figuring out what you need and what you want is quite hard, and probably also one of the difficult things in this whole play. So do you have any like insights on how you do that?
Yeah, so my first insight, and I know we have 1 minute left, but it's a great question. So if you do not have an HR business partner or someone that you have a relationship with in the HR unit that is responsible for your job roles, please make friends with them. Not because they are the experts on your role, they're not, but they know what the organizational structure looks like today. Then the second thing I would say is there are a lot of great data sets out there, whether you're leveraging the NICE framework, whether you are looking at data on the job requisitions that are out there for certain roles that you can use to kind of cross-correlate and create those roles and those role profiles. And lean on, I mean, you know, I'm biased. We do this for a living, so we have all the data on all these competencies, but being able to talk to the hiring managers, and you're essentially doing a job task analysis. What do I need? What does it actually look like? Keep asking, what, why? When someone says I need them to be able to like do a Splunk query, why? Like don't just go to the tool, keep peeling that back. That is the hardest part of kind of making that definition and sometimes defining those roles. But work with HR because you can't do it without them. You have to fit into that system. And you have to bring in your hiring managers, the job managers for each of those functional areas to get to ground truth. I've seen a lot of organizations take all their job descriptions, put them together, and just throw them out and say, we're gonna start over. And we're gonna say, what do we need for this, you know, you have to sort of have that first conversation. What kind of team do we wanna build? Do we wanna put in? We're gonna outsource. We have an MSSP for over here, but we're gonna do internal vulnerability management over there. Make those decisions, and then you can figure out where you're putting people versus technologies versus outsourced versus insourced.
Yeah, maybe to add on that, I think I can always recommend benchmarking, because most of the time you're surprised when you see what like other companies in your size do. Then most of the time it's much more people than you would count by just thinking about yourself. But yeah, thinking then about it, it makes total sense. So that just adding to what you said.
Yeah, thank you. Awesome.
So we're at the end of this, okay. Please reach out to us if you have any thoughts about workforce development, Moneyball for workforce development. If you need training opportunities, talk to Simone. If you're interested in podcasts about cybersecurity, come talk to me. I'm wandering over to the bookstore to sign all the books you guys are going to buy, okay, at the end of this. Thank you all for coming, and enjoy the rest of the
Thank you all, and thank you for being here on the last day of the show.